What's up, YouTube? It's Aerith here, your favorite preservation evoker. And today I wanted to talk to you about a very interesting and potentially contentious topic. I wanted to talk to you about what I think the best healer in Dragonflight for Mythic Plus Season 1 is. I think at this point you all have a pretty good idea of what some of the contenders are. I'm talking, of course, about Restoration Druid and Preservation Evoker. But if we were to weigh these two against one another, I think that that is an entirely different conversation. Before we go any further, make sure that if you like Mythic Plus content, if you like healer content, or if you just like being silly in general, that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel and that you follow my Twitch. I am probably streaming right now at the time of this that you are watching this video because I am DJing and I stream all the time. You can find me at twitch.tv/eyelashtv. I would love a chance to hang out with you and to get to know you. With that said, let's go ahead and just jump right into it. I think that the easiest way to kind of explore the answers to some of these questions is just to look at raw data. Data, of course, never lies and is not opinionated. So let's go ahead and hop straight into the numbers behind some of this discussion. So here I have brought up the Raider.io unique healer class population for key levels 20 and up. And as you can see, as you might have expected, it is very lopsided. We have a lot of restoration druids that are present in this meta share and a lot of evokers. Currently, restoration druids make up just under 40% of the meta share. That is a significant number. And preservation evokers make up around 25.6% of the meta share. Also significant, not quite as significant as the number of restoration druid. Um, so I think that if we're going to answer the question as to what is the best healer in Mythic Plus for Season 1 in Dragonflight, um, what is the best healer to bring to your group? First things first, we do not bring healers based on how good they are at performing their duties in the raw. Healer is not the role that the group is warped around. We, of course, warp our groups around the DPS, and in this season, it is no different. So a very, very important thing to note is that there are presently two group compositions, which are incredibly powerful, and one features Restoration Druid, one of which features Evoker. You'll see some of those groups here. Um, so something interesting that kind of happened on beta. People were not really super hyped about Enhancement Shaman. Um, but it has been a complete sleeper. My group did play an Enhancement Shaman on beta. We thought it was quite good. It does have notable downsides, being that it is quite squishy. But its upsides far outweigh its downsides. Its single target damage is insane. Its AoE damage is insane. And it also brings, very importantly, to the healer discussion, a Bloodlust. So if you get that Bloodlust out of an Enhancement Shaman, suddenly the interesting and unique utility that a Preservation Evoker has becomes a little bit less appealing. There's no reason really to have two bloodlusts in a group unless those two players are just people that you really want to play with. Um, so as I see it right now, there are two primary choices, and they're both kind of centered around the specific utility that these healers bring. Druid brings, of course, a battle res and a buff, which is incredibly potent. It is a versatility buff, which is effectively it's 3% verse, which is effectively 1.5% DR. That's half of a paladin DR buff in and of itself, plus 3% damage for your party. Cannot go without it goes without saying. Mark of the Wild is just an insane buff for Mythic Plus. Not having one in your group is a bit of a nerf. And the same is true of a battle res. If you do not have a battle res in your group, it's not really so great. The engineering options are not as good this time around. They are frequently backfiring, either for flavor purposes or for in order to try to make engineering itself more appealing. It's really unclear. At the end of the day, it just is a direct. It just is a very hard nerve to battle resing in general, and it makes having a restoration druid very appealing for that reason as well. That said, it is very possible to play an evoker still and be meta. And if we want to do this, we are going to be playing with another sleeper DPS pick, and that is Balanced Druid. So in my opinion, you're doing one of two things. You are either playing a warrior with an evoker and a balanced druid, or you are playing a warrior with a druid and you are bringing a bloodlust and an enhancement shaman. We see these classes all over the leaderboards. It's kind of interesting when you actually go and you look at the DPS, because what you'll see is that Balance Druid is actually well underrepresented. I think this is because people have not yet caught on in pugs to the power of Balance Druids. They do an absolutely nutty amount of damage. They're uncapped. You might see them doing the upwards of 1 million damage to the first pull in Althgar Academy if you do the entire room. Very, very good class in general. They have a great damage profile. They lack a kick, but if you're playing double melee, it's okay. And of course, they also bring the all important Mark of the Wild buff, which is an incredibly potent thing to have in your party. I think that as we continue along in the season, you're going to see this number steadily rise because Balance Druid is, again, very, very strong and it gets stronger on Tuesday with the redesign to the talent tree. Um, so with that in mind, we are pretty much always going to be bringing a warrior to these high tanks. Um, and yeah, the rest of the composition is kind of up in the air a little bit. So I did want to talk a little bit about a couple things. I wanted to weigh these two healers against one another, kind of in a vacuum, so to speak. Um, Aside, we talked a little bit about their utility. Preservation Evokers bring a lust, of course, and Druids bring a battle res. Druids also bring Mark of the Wild. But aside from these things, let's talk about how good they are in their own right, in a vacuum, without any groups whatsoever, just analyzing them for what they are. So the first thing I wanted to note, and this is very important when we're looking at the 37% versus 25%, something that Jeeth Bell said on stream a while ago that has always stuck with me. He was at the time progging Mythic Jailer, and he was making what was a numerically suboptimal decision. Um, but he stood very strongly by his decision. And when chat asked him about it, I remember his answer very, very directly. He said, um, I am taking this option because it is easier to play, and they are close in power level. If something is similar power level, but one thing is easier, the easier choice is always the better. Because over time, across 100 keys, 200 keys, 300 keys, the thing that is easier is going to just inevitably succeed in places where the thing that is very hard to do will at times fail just because of the difficulty of it. Um, and to that effect, I would say that Evoker is significantly harder to play well than Restoration Druid is. The two specs are really night and day in that regard. Restoration Druid does have a very robust damage profile, and the actual damage rotation is very interesting and nuanced and somewhat convoluted when you're performing at the absolute highest level with it. But you still get the most out of your damage by just pressing Sunfire and spamming Moonfire at the end of the day. The same as okay, the same as it's in the opposite regard. Preservation Evoker has a fairly simple damage profile and damage a fairly simple damage rotation. However, where these two classes are utterly different is Preservation Evoker is incredibly hard to play at the highest levels in terms of healing throughputs, and Restoration Druid is very, very easy to play at the highest levels. And I think that as people continue to grow and learn Preservation Evoker, maybe we'll see this gap get a little bit closer together. But at the end of the day, I do believe that Restoration Druid does have a little bit more healing, even when they are both being played incredibly well. And so let's talk a little bit about that and kind of like what goes into that opinion. So when we talk about Restoration Druid, we're talking about a healer that has a lot of sustain. That is the biggest draw of this class. There is never a point in time when you run out of things that you can press. No matter what negative thing is happening to your team, you always have healing for it. So you might have seen me playing a lot of Restoration Druid over the last few days on my stream. I was actually at the time 389 when I did this 22, and it felt really, really chill. Um, I was able to cover for mistakes that my team made, even being incredibly undergeared, just because I had a lot of consistent throughput. And while I was definitely undergeared for the content, it still did feel relatively tame. And for that reason, like I've been loving it. I've been playing quite a lot of it. Don't worry, those of you who know me as a Preservation Evoker, I'm not going anywhere. Preservation is still my favorite spec. I still would much rather play Preservation any day of the week. But I do think that it is worthwhile for me to invest in Druid at this point in time, and I will definitely be playing both of them. So as we mentioned, Restoration Druid has a lot of sustained healing, which has an inherent power level unto itself to be able to just consistently heal your group regardless to what is going on. But aside from that, looking at the Evoker profile, Evoker has a lot of what I would call burst healing. So Evoker has very, very, very powerful abilities that have 30-second cooldowns. When you use these abilities, it does tons and tons and tons of healing. Cannot say enough for how much burst healing you have. And there are definitely dungeons where that is exactly what you want to have. Ruby Light Pools is definitely one of those dungeons. There are just damage events that where they just burst your team down really, really quickly, and being able to very rapidly top your group in like the blink of an eye is something that an evoker can do over and over and over and over again. Of course, you do not have the consistent healing behind this, and that is the main downside. So that burst healing does come with a price. Um, and I would say that Druid also has pretty good burst healing as well. It's just on a bit of a longer timer. Flourish is an incredibly potent burst healing spell. You see me popping Flourish right here. And even though I'm quite undergeared, the team remains very safe through this frost overload. Convoke the Spirits is a very powerful burst spell on a 1 minute cooldown. Evokers, of course, have a 30-second massive burst healing spell that is somewhat similar to Convoke the Spirits in Spirit Bloom. It's just a single press that takes about 5 seconds to empower, and once it is empowered, it's going to effectively AoE lay on hands your entire team, provided you are higher health than them when you start to channel it, so that you get full use of your mastery. Um, so that is kind of the difference between the two healing profiles. And again, I think that they shine in different places. So some of the places where I think Resto Druid is just a lot better than Evoker would be Temple of the Jade Serpent. That last boss, it's just constant damage. The damage never stops from start to finish. It is just a lot of damage. And so for that reason, a consistent healer is going to have a massive edge. Also the third boss, you have very, very strong single target healing as a druid. Once you have fully ramped on someone, they have every single one of your hots. They are effectively immortal. I mean, it doesn't matter what the damage event is. If someone is fully hotted by a restoration druid, it is just so much single target healing. So that is really, really good for the third boss. You kind of have to pull your rabbit out of your hat on the third boss as an evoker. It is very doable, but it is a bit of a challenge. And in some of the high tyrannical keys, we've seen quite a few restoration druids heal a 24 temple, but not very many evokers have been able to heal a 24 temple as of yet. I believe there are just two recorded, or maybe just one, and they had a second dispel for the last boss. Of course, on a 23, it is still very doable on either class. And at some of these lower levels, it is also doable, but it is worth noting that this is very much a thing. Another dungeon where that we might analyze is, of course, Ruby Life Pools. There's a lot of burst healing in Ruby Life Pools, and for that reason, I think my recommendation for the best healer in this dungeon would definitely be an Evoker, provided it is played well. You have the burst healing for every single damage event. That is not to say that Restoration Druid is not incredibly powerful in this dungeon as well, because it is. Restoration Druid does not really have a weakness per se. But I think at least on the last boss in Ruby Life Pools, that's a very, very free boss for an evoker. You have instant cast rewind. Does not matter what is happening, you can rewind one of those damage events. And of course, you have the massive stasis that you can build up. You can tip the scales into a Spirit Bloom. You have so many options that are just overwhelmingly potent. And of course, Zephyr is incredibly powerful. It's effectively Devotion Aura for a lot of these abilities that you will be using it for. And in that regard, I would say that Zephyr is super good. It's not something that Druid is able to do. At the end of the day, I think that you are able to cover mistakes, especially your own mistakes, as a Resto Druid a lot easier than you are as an Evoker. Um, as an Evoker, if you, let's say you're ramping and someone misses a Cinderbolt kick and you're in the middle of your ramp, you go Echo, 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 and you're planning on going Verd Embrace into Health Potion to heal through the damage that's about to happen. Um, all of a sudden you're faced with an interesting choice. You have to cancel your ramp, so effectively consume your echoes if you want to spot heal that person, or you can maybe time dilation them. But it really puts you in a really bad position when people eat mechanics or something bad happens while you're in the middle of an echo ramp. It can definitely really get in the way. Similarly, while you're filling a stasis, if someone suddenly misses a kick and needs a dispel, or something to this effect, it can really throw a wrench in your plans. That can be a big problem. Also, just the nature of the ramps in general that an evoker does. are very, very GCD intensive. It requires a lot of GCD perfection in some cases. And you have to do them, you have to execute them very, very perfectly. This is not something that is baked into Resto Druid whatsoever, because you kind of just press the same buttons for every damage event, and all of your buttons kind of do the work themselves. Um, for instance, convoke the spirits, you just press that button and it does big healing. Nothing really to it. You can enforce nature swiftness before the convoke the spirits to get full benefit from the nature swiftness buff for every regrowth inside of it. That's a little trick you can do. But there's nothing really complicated about it. You keep out 2 life blooms. Your first regrowth is going to be on a non-life bloom target so that you cleave your hots onto them. You can put out rejuves and keep an F-flow down, and then wild growth when there's damage. It's very straightforward. You're always doing the same thing on repeat. Not the case for Evoker, where every single ramp is completely unique and is its own animal, where you have these abilities like stasis, which allow for infinite creativity in the way that you are approaching each of these stasis windows. So yeah, they're very, very different in this regard. And as G said, when things are very similar in power level, you will see better success with the thing that is easier. That said, I like the challenge. I like how difficult it is. I like how punishing it is. I think that one thing about Preservation Evoker that I have learned is that it is pushing me to become a better player. I feel myself growing every time I log on and I play this class. I think about the game in a way that I've never thought about the game before for as long as I've been playing World of Warcraft. And it has just pushed me into this interesting headspace where I feel that I don't know. It's incredibly rewarding. I feel myself growing every time I log on, truly. And it's just such a brilliant, brilliant feeling. And there's literally nothing that could replace that. At the end of the day, played perfectly in a team that is well organized. I think it is definitely true that Evoker can do just as much healing as a Resto Druid. But as I mentioned earlier in the video, there are definitely damage profiles that are significantly better for a Druid to heal and some that are better for an Evoker to heal. So at the end of the day, in this regard, you can pick your own poison. In terms of damage, I think that Evoker definitely has a slight edge. Restoration Druid does have some very, very powerful single target, 2 target cleave, 3 target cleave, and up to like 5, 8 targets. Like their damage is quite good. They are uncapped with Sunfire. However, they just do not do the same mass AOE damage that an Evoker does, and their burst is also a little bit worse, which does matter in some cases. But not all. But sometimes burst healing or burst damage is quite useful. Um, I would say that all in all, though, Evoker definitely gets the edge in the damage department, especially once they get all of the quote unquote infinity stones, which of course I'm referring to all of the powerful, one ofs like the fire ring from the raid, the staff from the raid. All of these different things are powerful tools that are available specifically to Evoker, but that are not available to Restoration Druid. Every time you press the Evoker staff, you will do, of course, around 500,000 damage to your target. I mean, that's just very powerful. And once you have everything collected on your Evoker, you will be doing so, so, so much damage. Um, yeah. So with that said, I think that's pretty much everything that I have to cover. The 2 specs ultimately at the end of the day are very close. Restoration Druid definitely is a lot easier. Definitely probably does a decent amount more healing presently. Um, when played optimally. But I mean, again, they are quite close, and it definitely depends on the pilot's skill level in the case of Evoker. And Evoker's utility is also something that is quite unique, as is Resto Druids. So it's not as if the use cases are necessarily overlapping as much. So with that said, I did want to look really briefly at some of the nerfs that are coming out on Tuesday. Because we actually are seeing some Restoration Druid nerfs. So we're actually going to see a verdancy healing reduction by 10%. This one's not a huge deal, but it is something that is quite potent. This, of course, just gives you a big heal. It's a ladybug that just flew in my hair. It's a ladybug. Aw. We have a ladybug infestation. I don't know. They're cute, so we don't care. That said, verdancy healing is of course if people are sending your F-flow when your life bloom blooms, they get a big heal. So that is being reduced. This is the bigger one. Adaptive Swarm now increases the effectiveness of periodic effects by 20%, was 25. And Adaptive Swarm healing and damage reduced by 10%. We also, of course, are seeing a nerf to Dream State, which was when Tranquility reduced the cooldown of major abilities. This was a fairly niche pick. Um, I'm sorry, this is actually a buff, rather. Um, this is actually a buff to Dream State, yeah, up from 15 to 20 seconds reduced cooldowns. People weren't really picking this. Maybe they'll start picking it. Um, and yeah, the adaptive swarm though is the bigger thing. This will be somewhat significant. But I wouldn't say it's the end of the world. I think that it will not be enough to move them from their current seat where they are sitting very, very well ahead of everyone else in terms of classes that are being taken. For the first time this season, I was actually told this morning by a pug group that they did not want to take me to their 24 no cood because they specifically wanted a druid, even though they already had a druid in the group, a DPS druid. So that felt kind of bad. But it is something that is happening. So yeah, with all of that said, I think that pretty much sums up all my thoughts on this topic. Let me 1 second. Yeah, with all that said, that pretty much sums up my thoughts on the topic. At the end of the day, play what you like. If you're playing either of these two healers, you're in a great spot. These two healers are very meta. They both have a place in World First Keys, and I don't think that is changing anytime soon. If you want to challenge yourself, if you want to grow as a player, I would strongly recommend Evoker. If you just want something that is going to get the job done, that's just going to be like really like to the point. You press buttons and they do healing. Go with a Restoration Druid. Resto Druid also has a very, very nuanced and interesting, probably the most nuanced DPS profile in the game as far as healers go. So I mean, you really can't go wrong. There's depth to both of these classes, and they are probably the two deepest classes as far as Mythic Plus healing goes, anyway. So with all that said, thanks for tuning in. Again, follow me on Twitch. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Comments, leave me a note down in the comments and let me know what you think about these changes that are coming up on Tuesday. Will it shift the meta? What do you think about my perspective? Am I on? Am I on about this? Am I off about this? Just let me know. And until next time, I'll see you guys soon. Bye.